you.
Hello everyone. I'm really surprised. I thought I might have one or two, just be people that I know, so thanks all for coming in, and apologies if you missed a chance now to be next door. You're in here for the whole thing. So, unlike the heading that says Estates Demystified, or whatever the title is, I'm not sure, but this is what we're here for. It still is covered within that, but the session that's labelled up is a little bit different to that. But I thought maybe I'd start with by just telling you who I am, and a little bit about me for those that don't know. So Tracy Field, I used to be a head of estates for a multi-academy trust of 30 schools in the northeast. So I've lived, breathed, done the job within the education sector, but I set up on my own in May as a consultancy, still supporting. At the end of August, I published a book called Leading and Managing an Education Estate, and I am absolutely passionate about changing the way things are done in schools, in the sector generally, with an assumption that just one person is responsible for a whole estate, when it isn't. It's so much more than that. It's that leadership within that. But behind all of that, my degree of construction management, I've done project management, quality, all of that. So 25 odd years of experience in assets, property, in general, which is why I'm allowed to stand in the front and choose. So what we're going to do today, so 40 odd minute session today, so aimed at giving you a clear and practical understanding of estates from a business leadership perspective. So we'll be covering where estates fits into your role, what's changing and what's out there in national guidance, and what good leadership and oversight looks like without getting sort of lost in technicalities. It's going to be quite a practical session, and looking at which tools are worth investing your time into. So this is designed really for professionals in estates, whether you're managing it, supporting it, or just needing to understand where your role fits within the whole wider estates discussion. So you don't need to be a compliance expert, you don't need to be a building surveyor. Hopefully you'll just get some value from this and know where you fit in, what good looks like, and what tools are available to help you. So hopefully it'll be rooted in realities of your day job, and just enough guidance to be able to give you clarity on what you need to do to move forward. If you've got questions, we can deal with them at the end. I know I'm sometimes one who has to sit through, process, go back to my place of work, and then the questions come, and that's fine. Reach out if you need to at a later date if you ever have anything come from this afterwards. So, why estate strategy matters. So people just think estate is just the building, and it definitely isn't. It's not just bricks and mortar. So the site team, a new building project, it's not just that, it's so much more. So the estate underpins safety, compliance, curriculum delivery, SEND, access, staff wellbeing, carbon reduction, and financial stability. All of that comes within the estates, not just head of estates manager, site manager, everything is captured in there. And your buildings are your biggest asset, but in a lot of cases are also your biggest liability. So if you're not actively shaping the estate, the chances are you're probably reacting to it rather than having strategic thought around that. And this will come at higher costs, put you under pressure of time, potential reputational damage and risk. So all the decisions that you make, whether directly or indirectly, have an impact on learner outcomes. And so, we're all here because we want our young people to have the best start, the best education, and it isn't just from the curriculum, that is in and around the buildings that we used for those. Upon that, the bar is rising. DfE and Ofsted are watching more closely, and they are. So you'll find now that if you have an Ofsted visit, it doesn't just look at curriculum and in the classroom. It's looking at, have you got your compliance check? Have you got a strategic plan? Where's your asset management plan? All of these things are included as you're training up to date. So it's not just about curriculum. But the point is the estate work and your strategic priorities need to align with the curriculum. It's no good one set of senior leaders doing the curriculum side and one set doing the estate side. The two have to align together, and that's obvious, quite often the big miss there. So you'll see now that in capital bids, whether you're SCA funded or whether you receive CIF, if you're SCA, you need to demonstrate how you've prioritised where you're spending that capital. If you're looking for a CIF bid, more and more now you need to show the sustainability, improvements that you're doing. You need to show how have you prioritised that needs doing over something else. And if you've not got a strategy, if you've not planned in advance, you really are just reacting and guessing, and that's not a good way to spend public money, and you end up doing things over and over. So these things need to align, and if you're a business leader, you're likely right in the middle of all of this. So even if you're not the one who's, checking a FID or commissioning a survey, it's important that you know what is happening, what's needed, how things are documented, and the impact of these decisions that are made in there. So you really do need, I always say, a seat at the table. Everybody, in every part of the organisation needs to be involved in these decision making, but they often aren't. So understanding your role and your limits. So just to touch on, I'm sure we're all aware of the differences between maintained schools, trust schools, etc., and who's responsible. So, saying your role may include flagging risks, or holding records, and liaising with contractors or site teams. But do you actually know what your role is, what you can do, who you can ask? They're not the same across every setting. So in maintained schools, we know that the local authority is the responsible body, and they hold the capital funding and make the financial decisions on projects, and carry the legal accountability for compliance. But within the school, you need to know that too. How can you even hold them to account if you're not aware of what's going on in your school, of whether things have been done or what's being missed? How can you be sure that what they're allocating funds to is actually the priority for you if you don't even know? So you're leaving somebody else to manage your building. School-based business leaders play a key role in this, managing minor works often, logging compliance checks, reporting issues, etc., and often acting as the operational lead on site, potentially with a site manager or a caretaker. But you need to understand what's going on and not think, well, that's okay, the local authority deal with that, it's all done. You need to be aware. In multi-academy trusts, the picture varies, so some trusts will have a centralised function. Some trusts will be that it's still local decisions and not perhaps pooled funding. So again, you need to understand where that is, and the estate responsibilities. So overseeing compliance, projects, servicing, budgets, and school business leader in this case is usually to support, to monitor, and to escalate, but you don't necessarily own it. But just because you don't own it doesn't mean you don't have to know about it or be interested in it or ask the questions of somebody else that is doing that. Never be afraid to challenge if you don't think that something is right. So you can delegate, obviously, certain responsibilities. Some trusts do, and they might have an in-house team and they go externally. But again, it's about understanding what's happening at yours. How many of us actually really know where responsibilities lie, whether that's health and safety checks, whether that's project management of a project's going through, we've got CDM or Building Safety Act. How many of us actually know this information? So if you are in a centralised team and there's a problem, it might not be yours to own, but actually you should be knowing that what's coming up, or be able to question to stop that and identify the risks to be able to be aware of those. So if you don't know who is responsible and you don't know what checks need to be carried out, how do you know they're done? How do you know what happens if a person is off and it falls down a hole because you're not aware of who's doing all of these things, and where's that resilience? And you need to know where risks are escalated to and what that process is to be able to close these out. So whichever one you sit under, Your role is not to do everything, but it is to understand what's being done, by who, and what you are or aren't accountable for. And knowing those boundaries definitely protects you and your trust, but it also helps you contribute more confidently, whether you're supporting or questioning what's going on within the estate's work in your organisation. So it wouldn't be right to be an ISBL, whether you call it ISBL or ISBL, event without mentioning where these fit into the standards. So it isn't just a facilities or a premises property topic. Estates is directly embedded into the professional standards, ISBL professional standards, and spans across multiple leadership domains. So I put them on there if you want to check them out. But it is, we've got risk management, so including health and safety, statutory compliance, and safeguards and risks related to the buildings. We've got our project oversight, so ensuring our projects are well scoped, monitored and delivered. And I'll come into some detail around these as we go on to the next slide. Even sustainability and innovation, so we're promoting smarter, more responsible decisions about estate use and design. And then under finance, there's also obviously links to capital planning, life cycle funding, and aligning spend with strategy. And so again, it's this important thing of everyone moving in the same direction, not finance looking at one thing, curriculum something else, estate something else. So if you're using these standards in appraisals or recruitment or your continual professional development, then these help to reinforce that estates isn't just an operational task, that actually it is a significant leadership area. This is why I go back to leading and managing an estate. It isn't just managing your education estate. So this triangle diagram reflects that the estate sits at the centre, but it is surrounded by these. So this all shapes how the estate is managed. And if one of these areas is weak, then the estate suffers. And leaving estates unmanaged means all of these areas are at risk. So they're not all one looked at in isolation. You can have a poor finance department, but everything is fine, or a poor estates department. It's not. They all run along together. So if we look at what good estate management looks like, so we'll start at the corner there. A clear written strategy aligned to school trust priorities. Who here has an estate strategy? Know what it says? Knows when it was last updated? I know, Roger, you're definitely going to have one. Yeah. You've got, and it's great. You've got, okay, brilliant, and you know where it is. It's not just on a, in a SharePoint folder somewhere. Nobody knows what it looks like, or in an Excel document or something, because that's generally the case. Or it was done so long ago. There's been lots of changes, and nobody has updated that. Or it's been written in isolation. I mean, I've got experience myself with, strategy. There was an estate strategy. There's a curriculum strategy, an IT strategy. No one knew what anyone else was doing. You can't have that. You obviously need to have your own strategy, but they need to take into account everybody's area, so they all move in the same direction. So, like I was saying before, estates should support curriculum delivery. It's not just about the building. So then we've got asset and condition data is up to date and informs decisions. It sounds like common sense, doesn't it? But a lot of schools and trusts are still relying on the CDC data, so condition data collection, information from whether round 1 or round 2. I mean, I don't know if anybody have seen these documents, but I mean, you need a degree probably just to be able to read it and interpret the way that they're reported. Now, these documents they're put out purely to show the government the overall condition of schools in percentages, right? But they're used when it comes to things like the school rebuilding programme, and other bits. They are looked at. And while they're fine if you've got nothing else, to manage your schools, manage your all your assets and your estate, you should be having full asset condition information. CDCs don't cover roof, for example. They don't go into details, start doing core samples. Very light touch on M&E. All the essential things, your big risk items in your setting isn't captured in central data. So you need to have your own. But it also needs to inform the decisions that you do. And if you've done work, you update your asset plan and you make sure that it's up to date as you're doing it. And you then look at perhaps I've got similar. You don't want to dig up the playground this year because you're replacing some water pipe, and then next year you're digging up the playground because it needs replacing. Right? So we need to be aligning all of these things together, and often this is where the gaps are. So what compliance is recorded, monitored, and evidenced. So we have to have that. We know that, but who knows what every compliance check needs to be done? Head teachers often don't realise all the responsibilities and the accountability that they hold for compliance, and quite often it's left on the shoulders of a site manager, a caretaker, that they carry out the checks, and then they don't come in for a week, they're on holiday, they're off, whichever it might be. I don't know, you have a HSC visit and they say, I want to see all your Legionella checks, and they go, oh, it's not been done for 3 weeks because the site manager wasn't here. Who knows, it's fallen down the hole, where's that resilience? So we need to have it recorded. It needs to be saying, if it's not recorded, it's not evidence, it didn't happen. We all know that. But also, what if there's an issue? So they're doing a compliance check, I don't know, they're checking their emergency lighting, and there's a fault with that. Does the site manager, caretaker, whoever's doing the check, do they know what they need to do to alert the fact that there's an issue? Does anybody have the approval status to be able to say, yes, you can go and get that repair done? Or does it sit reading through multiple channels of getting approval to carry out a repair on an emergency light? And all these things have a delay and a factor on how your estate is managed. So even that resilience of what checks are there, how are they recorded, and how are we following up on those? Projects is a big one on good estates management. Very often you'll get, I don't know, a site manager, head team, could be anybody, saying, come Mr. Contractor, I need you to do this, this, this and this. Mr. Contractor, 3 of them. They might go and get the 3 quotes. They put a quote down and the school goes with the cheapest quote. And at the end of it, they go, oh, I thought I was going to have this done and this done. Like, did you actually say that's what you want? And are the right people involved at the start of project works to say, this is my key thing that I need at the end of it? So what is that output that you're expecting at the end? And if you haven't got the right people at the start of the project discussions in the room and discussing how they're impacted, at the end of that project you're not going to have what you want, and then you're going to have rework, you're going to have disappointment, more school closure. The impact is huge. And then potentially you've got additional spend that you've not allowed for. But within that, the project as well is also about managing your risk of that. So I spoke before about CDM, so Construction Design Management Regulations. We've got the Building Safety Act. There are significant risks there now for schools, and this is where you should know what you can do in-house and what you should be looking at for external parties to support with that. So risks are logged, escalated and reviewed. We all know we need to keep a risk register, but I wonder how many of us do properly keep a risk register. We know that's a bit of an issue there, but it's not recorded anywhere. If it's not recorded anywhere, nobody owns it. If nobody owns it, it doesn't get done, and then that risk just grows and it becomes absolutely catastrophic. So, this is basic information, isn't it? But they're the key things that I just missed, overlooked, because we're all so busy. We think somebody else is dealing with it. We don't know what's our responsibility and what is somebody else's. So we need to ensure that our risks are closed off. Sustainability and accessibility considered, not just tick box. And again, this goes back to these early conversations of having the right people in the room about, if I do this, how does it impact the learner at the end? How does it impact the staffing at the end? How is that experience for everybody around that? And we also got things like our climate action plans and our sustainability leads. And whether it's mandated, not mandated, there's still a bit of we don't know whether it is or not right now. Guidance is out, then it's not out. Whatever that is, it seems to me now that we're potentially going to end up with just a long list of what is on your climate action plan, with no additional funding maybe to actually address it, right? That's going to be a problem for all. But if we don't know what's on there, we can't potentially include that in with our strategy in the first place. So we align them. If we're doing improvements, we pick up what the sustainability and the accessibility side are. So they all run in line together, and we avoid that rework. If you're doing a roofing project, maybe you can't put solar PV on it now, but you would ensure that it was able to take the weight of that going forward. So you'd be looking forward about what can I do now to ensure that things can be future-proofed as much as possible with that. And then there's a leadership level oversight and regular reporting. I found in a trust that very few, I'm a trustee for two mats, and I go regularly for a site walk around. I want to see the documentation, because that's what your job is there, to make sure that things are running how they should be and the checks are in place. And it's not to catch people out, but it's to continually improve. And where people are so busy, your eye goes off the ball and it focuses on one thing, and it's easy to slip. So that leadership level is, head teacher, CEO maybe. Let's come to the school one day and just have a walk around for half an hour. Everyone walks like this, nobody ever looks up, nobody ever looks down, and you miss these things. But how many have got monthly governor walk-arounds, head teacher walk-arounds, CEO? Get them out. I know when I used to talk about estates, because people can't see, unless there's water pouring through the ceiling, then it's like there's nothing wrong, it's absolutely fine. But if you're walking around, you're more likely to notice some of these things. I don't know whether they're trip hazards, whether the gutter is full, or there's a football in the top of the hopper. Whatever these things might be, these are the little things that end up causing catastrophic disasters, but we're not checking regularly enough. Leadership aren't involved, so you need to get them out and saying, have a look at this, and if you're business managers, whatever your role is in there, also just have a look on site, and then you might understand a bit of the pain point, perhaps, of site managers, caretakers, because they are running around ragged, maybe reporting things, and are they actually being done because they're not seeing the bigger picture of actually they are significant things that need to be done. It'd be rude to say not about my book, wouldn't it, at this point, maybe, but my book is called Leading and Managing, purely of that. Like I said, it's not just a management issue of, an estate manager manages the estate, no one else is involved. A site manager manages that side. We don't need to know about when the bins are collected. We all need to lead and, make the estates a better place for everybody. So, I'm sure there'll be things on here that we're all aware of. GEMS is probably the biggest one. Are we all aware of GEMS, the Good Estate Management for Schools Guide? Yeah, okay. Well, so if you've got nothing else and you started with nothing else, then the GEMS is a good place to start. Obviously, the big headline was the DFE framework, which is really a bit of now a go-to document, perhaps, of bringing together everything from compliance, expectations, and to strategic planning and sustainability. And I guess maybe playbook, is that the term that people use? It's like a playbook of how estates should be managed in schools and trusts. And so alongside that, we've got the GEMS tools. Now, I know when I started off in education, I'd never heard of it. Never heard of it at all. I was in the job about 8 months before I realised what it was. My goodness, I wish I'd have had that back then, because if you've got nothing else, it's quite a good start. I'm not a huge fan of it overall, but it certainly is a step by step, and it tells you what you should be looking at. And you can almost use these as audit tools to see where you are now against all of these and identify the gaps. So we've got sustainability and strategy. So we've got our climate action plans, our sustainability. This is no longer an optional, nice to have, shall we do something that's, reduces carbon in our schools. The schools are being asked, how does what they do contribute to net zero and our longer term ambitions. So whether that's monitoring your energy usage, carbon plans, and even your procurement decisions, all align with these. And when we're looking at capital funding, we're saying you need to evidence it. More and more is asked about how does this align with decarbonising the estate. It isn't just about, well, we just need a new roof, but actually what improvements you're going to make. This boiler, what are you putting in? How does that impact overall? So we need to demonstrate priorities there. So we've got digital estate management. Now I know lots of schools that are still working in Excel spreadsheets. Fine, it's better than a piece of paper, and Johnny told us a story about a piece of paper sellotaped together for one school. No idea, hopefully we're past all of that. But actually, if you're in a trust and you've got, like 30 schools, how do I see that everyone is compliant other than going to each one and looking? And that is an option because you still like to do your little checks there. But ideally a centralised system of some sort that shows you at a glance where the gaps are. And the gaps aren't necessarily because people are being lazy or not doing them. It could be there's a training issue that needs to be identified, but you can't see them because you haven't got the data behind it to see what's needed. So if you have dashboards, and look at what's being done, what's not being done, are all of our compliance checks where they are. If you had a governor saying to you, can you demonstrate to me that our school is 100% compliant? You do very well unless you had some sort of system like this. But saying again, that just tells half the picture. You then need the data and the story behind that. So again, about this scrutiny of governance and oversight and knowing who is responsible and how do you know who's responsible? Is it just, Pete came in today and said, oh, by the way, you're dealing with sustainability today. How is that through of what the targets are, what their objectives are, who are they reporting to? How is that managed? What support have they got? People's roles are changing all the time, and is the training in place for people to be able to do the role effectively? And if someone's being put into a position where that training is needed, and as a manager or a senior leader, that is not being provided, then you're letting them down, but also the whole organisation down of not being able to give them support, and you're basically setting somebody up to fail, which is not nice, especially if people are keen to be able to do more, want to improve, but they can't because the support is not being given. So this governance and oversight is really important. And like I say, if I refer it back to my role as trustee, I ask the questions when we are in our board meetings or our committee meetings. And not all governors do, and I wonder how many governors even realise what their responsibilities are nowadays to what they were years ago to PTA type things. I think is what people think of, whereas actually they are accountable. And if something goes wrong, that that they're going to be there saying, well, why didn't you check this? Why didn't you ask the question? Why didn't you get evidence for this? It's all very important. Okay, so 5 red flags in estates leadership. So it almost is a flip really of what good estates looks like. So again, we don't have a written estate strategy, and if you do have one, does it actually align? So again, is it written in isolation? Does it marry what your whole strategy for the organisation is in terms of curriculum, sustainability, and building the future? Whether that's, I done a project last year for a trust, for the trust I was working for then, and we refurbished 2 classrooms. Came back after the summer and the CEO said, well, by the way, we're going to change that one into a nursery. Like, we've literally spent however many tens of thousands because they had one idea, saying you all need to be aligning together and have those conversations rather than just, magpie effect of something new and shiny. So we've got to go for that. Like, actually, how does that align with our 5-year plan? It doesn't. It needs to wait, it's being strong enough to be able to have those conversations. So if condition data is out of date or never used, again, it goes back, have you got it? Do you know what's in it? Does it cover all aspects of the building? Lots of them only cover the fabric of the building. Do you have, deep dive in your roofs? And there's lots of companies out there, roofing contractors, roofing suppliers, that will carry out free roof surveys, and they'll do your core sampling, and they'll give you you know, a whole view of your estate, purely because when it goes out for a roof replacement or repair, they want you to use their materials. That's fine, right? Because they're not determining who the contractor is, but there's lots of support out there, or consultants that can do these things to make sure that your condition data is where it should be, and you know, and if something's changed, I don't know, maybe there was a flood, maybe something's happened. So again, is your condition data out of date purely because it doesn't align with an incident that's happened? Has there been a fire in the school? You know, so you need to make sure that if something's changed, that you're reviewing your data. Again, compliance evidence is stored in email folders or in someone's head. You know, Joe knows that he's done all his water checks. He does them methodically every week, and it's written on a spreadsheet or a piece of paper that's in his office. It's not good enough anymore. It needs to be structured. It needs to be able to be followed up. It needs to be able to be looked at in an instant. So if you have an audit, whether that's internal, external, HSE, whatever it is, that information is able to be found instantly. And many times it isn't. People are scrambling through folders, you know, click, 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 you should be in, and that's where it is. Same thing. Again, capital works go ahead without clear scope sign-off or post-project review. So again, a flip side of what we are. The best projects that are run are not because they're great once the contractor is on site and they go before we even get to that point. So the point of what's the money, what do we need, what's our business case, what's the output that we need, what is it that we are trying to solve, and before you even get to that award or the contractor on site, does it still align with what we want the output to be? Has anything changed? Are there any new risks? The more you do before you actually get somebody starting a project, the more work you do in that, the easier your project will be, and the output will be what you want it to be. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with starting thinking we need this done, and you start, and then you get the right people in the room and you review it and you go, actually that doesn't work for me. Change it at that point, not when it's done. You know, we need something else. And again, and also who's responsible for it. So quite often you might have 2 or 3 people that are saying we're running this project, but no one's taking ownership. You need to have somebody who's going to manage that, take ownership, and also is skilled enough to do so. And if you're not, get the right people in to be able to do that. And this is the big one about the estate risks aren't log tracked or reported at leadership level. If you asked your CEO what's the 3 biggest risks in the estate, I bet not many CEOs would be able to know what they are. So they might be known at school level, they might even be known at estate manager, head of estates level, but are they discussed in weekly senior leadership team meetings? Is it even on the agenda of what's in our estate? You have HR on there, maybe finance on there, you probably have curriculum, you know, and support that way. But estates are very rarely mentioned in weekly meetings, you know, health and safety, things like that. So if they're not reported at leadership level, they're definitely not going to be resolved. You know, and that's a massive risk, and whether that ends up, you know, a worst case, a school closing. You know, no one wants to race to the bottom of having the worst estate, because you're not going to get your school rebuilt. So nobody, you know, so if people have that view, and there will be some CEOs certainly think, well, if we just don't spend any money, it'll eventually be rebuilt. You know, what is it? I think is it 428 years or something they say it will take if we allow for the fact of every school to go through. It's not going to be happening, and the future of school rebuilding programme will be more about refurbishment and not replacing whole blocks. It's going to be more focused around individual blocks and improvements that way. So if you're not logging your risks and knowing what is going to be an issue and what we need to be looking at strategically going forward, you are literally in a race to the bottom and just, you know, potentially end up with losing your school completely. So these are good things, Sam touched on a bit earlier on, you know, to strengthen your estate oversight. So if you don't use it, you haven't used it, or you're not familiar with it, not looked at it for a while, go to the GEMS guidance. And the same for the framework. The best way to use them really is to look at them as an audit of what you've got in your school. So open one up, you haven't got to do it all in a day, you're not going to, but what it will do is that's a gap. How are we going to fill that gap? Write the gap on your risk register and know what you need to do to be able to do it. Again, it's no good identifying things if you don't have somebody own it a closeout date, when's it going to be done, what the actual process is then for once you've highlighted these bits of information. And then we've obviously got the ISBL, the standards. So you're not expected to have all of these, fill it all in, know all of the information. If that was the case, none of us would ever be at any of these events, would we? You know, we'd all be running our estates perfectly. But you do need to make sure that you follow some form of guidance and have some, you know, we don't all know everything. We need to lean on places, we need to lean on information that's out there and available. And these are free tools that are available. So, you know, if your whole organisation is working in line with this, then you've got something of a process and a procedure to follow through. So, you know, you don't need to complete them all at once, but, you know, at least start with something and just put them in, identify where the gaps are, and then have these discussions in your senior leadership meetings as to what we need to do and how we need to follow through from those. So I'm hoping that maybe not even after this, but after your day-to-day here generally, there'll be about one estates issue that you now see differently. So I don't know, you might see that you don't have correct data, that your strategy hasn't been reviewed for a long time. So something that maybe may resonate and think, actually, I need to look at that when I go back. I need to highlight what that is. Maybe one conversation you need to have. So it might be with your site team, your COO, the governor, the local authority. You know, maybe it will be to your governor. I don't see you often enough. I'd like you to come in. You know, so that conversation that you have with the local authority. You know, you're spending money here. Actually, I think we could look at how we need to spend this differently. The tool that you'll pick up, maybe one of the GEMS guidance, a red flag you might follow up on. You don't have a risk register. And take a step forward on bringing all of these things together and talking about it, bringing leaders in to be able to move forward. Like I said, leadership in estates starts with clarity, so being clear about who does what, who's accountable, how you can take it forward, and rather than control. And they are resource links, so I think the slides get sent out to you, so they're all on there, all available. And that is that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Can I just say something, because that was a really useful session, really helpful, and having all the information in one place, which you go into loads of detail with, and I've known Tracy a while, which is excellent what she does. But I want to make a little bit of a complaint. I don't think you did a very good job of plugging your book, because I was fortunate enough in the summer to review the book, and honestly it is absolutely fantastic. If you haven't already got it, you've got some gear in it.
I have, yeah.
You need to get out there and sell them, because
Okay,
it's absolutely fantastic, because it's such practical things that we all talk about, but Tracy put it into a guide, and it's broken down for anybody in the audience to look at it, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. So once again, thanks very much for your session, and it's lunchtime now, everyone.